Well, good morning or afternoon, depending where you're at, to as it turns out, the three Johns. We have myself, John Jurisic, John Trelevin. The two of us host a Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, a trade committee sponsored show all about trade. And boy, oh boy, is that something that's of keen interest to business these days. We're very lucky and honored to have with us a guest from Waterloo, John Tennant. John, how are you this morning? Whoops, just I've got you muted, John. There we
Thank
go.
you. Yes, it's now my afternoon, and we've got lots of sunshine, so I'm doing fine.
John, we started this because somebody down south decided to upend the trade foundation of the world in February of 2025, and we've been reacting since. And what John and I have found through our various organizations and groups and networking uh, events that we attend is that business is really not understanding what this actually means to them. What is the real impact to them? So that's something I would love to start addressing. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've done and maybe how you know John Trelevin.
I was brought up in southern Alberta, went to McGill University, joined the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, the Canadian Foreign Service, uh, where I served for 39 years. During that time, I was in Melbourne, the Eastern Caribbean, Central America, twice in Japan, three times in the United States. My final assignment was as Consul General in Detroit, which is, of course, a huge funnel for Canadian trade into the United States. And it was, as chance would have it, at the time of 9/11, which certainly represented a huge disruption on the border for a period of time. But we were very, very successful at that time in bringing together the right type of political and administrative dialogue between Canada and the United States that got the border working pretty smoothly again. Of course, this is not the first time that Donald Trump has upset trade apple carts around the world. He's done it before. But just to finish off on me, after being in Detroit and that period of 9/11, I came to Waterloo Region to head an economic development agency, Canada's Technology Triangle Inc., which I did for 8 years. Subsequent to that, I've done economic development consulting, particularly in Ontario, but with federal and some other clients around the world for about 20 years. I'm slackening off a bit now, but with still a very, very strong interest. So from all of that, you can hear that I cross paths with that other John you have there, John Trelevin.
Absolutely. We are so lucky, so very honored to have you here.
Okay, now
And
behind me, John,
mhm,
is a painting that hung in Beverly's aunt's home in Lethbridge, Alberta. John is from Lethbridge, and so is
yes,
Beverly, and that's
yes.
southern Alberta.
Oh, I
And
see.
in John's career, we do share a couple of postings, not at the same time, but we both spent time in Japan.
Yes, yes,
And my U.S. posting, for what it is worth, was San Juan, Puerto Rico. I didn't get into the heartland of America. But we've known
yes.
each other for years. And I'm going to say one other thing. One of the things John did more recently was to be the convener of a group of Foreign Service retirees who appeared before the Canadian Senate to provide testimony, really to impede a bill that was going through the House of Commons, which would have, and I think has, embedded supply management in the Trade and Commerce, in the Foreign Affairs Act. John, you'll correct me. But since that time, John has kept us together by linking us virtually every week to 10 days with newspaper and other public reports on the Canada-US trade dynamic. I don't know anybody else who's followed this opera closer than John.
Well,
And I'm just,
then
John, I'm delighted that you accepted our invitation for this conversation today.
totally. Well,
Well,
why
no,
don't we get
it's great to join you. It's an extremely important topic, and very, very, very broad in terms of the things that can be addressed that may represent.
yes.
And let's
Well,
get the
why
focus
don't we
on opportunity.
excellent. Okay, well let's first just let's first start to clarify what. Okay, let's do a little role playing here. I'm a business person in Western Canada. I was sending a good part of my product to the US, and now I cannot for some kind of reasons, and I want to diversify. I don't know how to do that. Who do I call? Where do I go? What are the tools and information that I can access to help me? I think that's a basic question right across Canada. For smaller businesses, obviously the larger ones have a different ecosphere. But John, why don't you help us with that? Where do we start?
Well, first of all, both John and I come from the Canadian Trade Commissioner tradition, which is housed within Global Affairs Canada. And trade commissioners are in virtually every Canadian embassy, consulate general, consulate, high commission, whatever mission around the world.
Yeah.
But don't neglect the fact that the British Columbia government has some strategically placed offices in markets that are important to British Columbia. And both at the federal and at the provincial level, there are people in departments that are active in promoting, facilitating, and helping trade. Starting with those people in Canada is a very, very good place. So that's government. But then there are many other, and I think John would have some additional ideas of areas to plug in. One of the key areas is the FIT program, Forum for International Trade Training, which seeks to enable people that are exporters understand all the ins and outs. And in fact, it offers certification. Some community colleges in Canada offer it, and I don't think you have to go to an institution. You can do it online and in other ways.
If I can add, I was
yes,
on the
please go
board.
ahead, John.
I was on the board of FIT for many, many years, and I know Dieter Hallwick, the late Dieter Hallwick, who created all this. And what FIT has created is the world's best body of knowledge for trade practitioners.
It's been emulated by the US. Am I correct, John?
Well, there are. We had I'm not on the board anymore. We had a relationship with NASBITE, which is the U.S. Trade education organization. They sit on the FIT board, and I think Carolyn Tompkins, who will be perhaps our next guest, sits on their board. So there's a North American link, yeah, very much so. And the last time I looked, that course was being delivered in about 44 colleges and universities in Canada.
Right. It's a testimony to the people involved in FIT, you included, that others want to emulate us. Another one I'd mentioned too on the West Coast, at Simon Fraser University, the Jack Austin Center for Asia Pacific Studies has a Asia micro-credential program where you can similarly plug into real expertise to start to get to understand what the whole export program is all about. So there are some suggestions, but of course, the better place still is other exporters, and that's what the Chamber and other groups are bringing together and should be congratulated for doing so.
Well, thank you. That's much appreciated. I'll ensure that we highlight those links. And for those folks that are saying, where do we start? You've given a great suggestions and advice. Much appreciated. Let's shift now to policy. I get confused when I hear the news. I don't know who's doing what to whom and how are we. There's trade, there are tariffs over here, there are reciprocal tariffs over there, there's Kuzma. How would you frame this for us, John? Who's are we? I guess I don't. I want to jump to are we winning, but are we ahead of the game? Are we doing better than Trump is doing to us?
I certainly think that Trump has created opportunities for us, as
Okay.
well as having taken them away.
Mm.
And that would be a key point that I would stress. Um, Canada has 15 free trade agreements that cover 61% of the world's gross domestic product. And that's 1.5 billion consumers worldwide. Those are our free trade agreements. And of course, the US and Mexico are an important part of that. But as I said, there in total are 15. And Donald Trump has done us favors in the past. In his first term, one of the first things he did was to pull the US out of the negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. So we and the others, there are 12 now, including us, that have stayed in, all have preferential access to those Trans-Pacific countries around the area. And they're right in your backyard if you're sitting on Vancouver Island. Secondly, of course, we have a broad free trade agreement with Europe that came into effect 8 years ago this month. The United States has never been able to achieve a free trade agreement with Europe. And Donald Trump, in the deal that he's got, certainly was not talking about anything approaching a free trade deal.
No.
It was his crazy deals.
Yes.
So that means that in Europe, we have an advantage. Now, surely the Canadian exporters that have been exporting into the United States are competitive not only in the US, but in a lot of other world markets like these, where they've got a leg up because of our free trade agreements on the United States.
The other
Another
thing,
dimension, another dimension, just finally,
yeah.
and there are more, is South Korea. And again, Trump's done us a great deal. The US concluded a free trade agreement with South Korea several years ago, a number of years ago. We sought to emulate it and did, so that we have had a very similar arrangement. But now Trump has gone after South Korea and essentially negated that agreement. So, I mean, these are all situations in which Canada and a Canadian firm could find itself with a tariff preference against US exporters in these markets. And why don't we go after it? Because going back to these free trade agreements, they represent about 25 times the Canadian population if you add them all together. That's a pretty big market.
John Trelevin, I know you have a question. I just want to have an emotional reaction to this, John. I did not know that. So this is a great moment. I feel better already. I feel better as a Canadian and as a Canadian business person to know these things. Thank you for that information. John Trelevin, go.
No, we have been negotiating these arrangements for a very long time, and several of the agreements have been negotiated by people who've agreed to be on this broadcast. John mentioned SFU. Well, Stuart Beck, former president of the Asia Pacific Foundation and High Commissioner in New Delhi and many other places, will be one of our next guests. What I would like to say is that in addition to having those free trade arrangements, we have free trade arrangements with countries that are currently really pissed off with the United States.
Right.
Here.
So when an American business comes in comes in to sell their product, they have to overcome what they never had to overcome before, really. And taking John's point, there are many ways in which, strangely, the Trump mindset, zero-sum game of trade, is strengthening this country. And I'll just for a second say, not the least of which is the Prime Minister's resolve to create for the first time in Canadian history an open, free trade Canadian domestic market, which has been denied every company in the country since the country was formed. So yes, great points, John. Great points.
Here. The other area that I would certainly suggest get some attention in terms of diversification is services trade. Services trade are intangibles. The services trade includes things like engineering services, tourism, communications tools, et cetera, et cetera. And seldom do services trade face tariffs. There may be some other niceties to it, like in tourism, Chinese tourists that want to come to Canada, the United States, wherever, have to get a visa from their own government. And the Chinese government can be tough about that. But broadly speaking, services move without tariffs, including into the United States. This is an area broadly for very considerable trade diversification. And yes, I would underline John's point, John Treleaven's point about just how many countries have soured on Trump because of the very callous way in which he's behaving. And two great examples recently would be India, where he's seeking to punish them for buying Russian oil, China, and Brazil, where he's thrown a big tariff up on Brazil because they're going after a former Brazilian president who is a friend of Donald Trump's, but who supposedly attempted a coup d'etat in Brazil. Being tried for.
And
so,
John's...
I mean, this is a world in which rational, reasonable, reliable exporters from some nice place like Vancouver Island should find that there's some sort of very nice carpet, welcome, handshake, and nice to see you when they tackle any market abroad.
Of course, you got to be competitive. But as John Tennant pointed out, if you're competitive in the United States, the chances are you'd be pretty competitive in most other open markets.
Oh, quite right. And I would assume that most Canadian firms, even with the border blocked or made much more difficult, you're just too close or have had some previous experience. You know who you're competitive with. And of course, some of those U.S. firms compete against you in Canada. So are you competitive with U.S. firms? If the answer is yes, or nearly so, then there are all these situations where the way it is now, and it will be, Canada and Canadian firms have got a leg up on the United States to begin with.
Okay, John T. I'll do that. Oh, you're both John T's. Oh my gosh.
We are jaunty people.
Okay, John from Waterloo. I doubt there'll be anyone who can fully understand the mind of Donald Trump. But when one looks at what the American government is doing, the premise being that if we stop trade from coming in, that product will ultimately be produced in the United States. And therefore create jobs, etc. You were very much involved with trade in the U.S. What are the flaws to this thinking, John? Why will this not work? And then I hear occasionally, well, it would be that Apple phone would be $5,000. Perhaps you can reflect on that, please, for us.
Well, point number one is what business outside the United States is really going to be very confident taking a business decision about doing business in the United States, even if at the moment, because the harebrained Donald Trump has put up a tariff, it would do it. And of course, part of his negotiating strategy has been to get undertakings from other trading partners about investment in the United States. Well, we'll see. But it's not welcome. It might promote some, but you're moving into a situation where I don't think you can expect that many people that might succeed Trump would continue on the same vein.
Right.
Possibly, yes,
Right.
but that's not very long from now before there's another election. So that's one of his objectives, clearly. Another is he wants the tariff revenue. He's got a huge deficit. And he wants to find money anywhere he can. And he is getting significant revenue from the tariffs so far. But that's very, very poor policy. That's where tariffs started, actually. If you go back to the previous century, tariffs were in place to earn revenue. And it was only at the turn of the century, 1900, really after the First World War, when corporate and personal income tax came into play, and tariffs became something that just wasn't a consideration in terms of government revenue any longer, because those were reliable, sensible ways to do things. So this idea of tariffs as a revenue source goes back to over
A while.
120 years. But that's what he's after. But it's why it's not a sustainable, it's not a well thought through, it's not a logical way to be running in the kind of world that we have and need today. So,
Yeah, well, and the false premise that guides him is that the US can be self-sufficient in everything. Too bad the potash reserves for the world are in Saskatchewan. It's a shame that the uranium mines in Saskatchewan are 100 times richer than uranium mines anywhere else on Earth. Well, Thomas Friedman, I watched a podcast yesterday. He basically said Trump is locked in a world that no longer exists, trying to stimulate what can't happen. Even think about the the automobile industry. Probably everything eventually could be produced, and John was in Detroit in the United States, but how many years would that take? And how will cars be produced in the meantime? So generally speaking, I think one of the issues that at least I think we've overlooked is the inelasticity of demand for Canadian products. That, by the way, includes tourism. I mean, we're on Vancouver Island. Victoria's brand is Butcher Gardens. What do they get? 1 million visitors a year. The dream of Chinese tourists is to visit Butcher Gardens. I mean, all of those factors are overlooked in the world that Donald lives in, which is black and white. I win, you lose. John's describing the world that does exist, and there are lots of opportunities.
Well, at some point, therefore, there has to be some supply chain collapses in sectors in the U.S. that will result in huge price increases. When, John Tennant, do you think that might happen? If it will happen?
It probably is something that, given the fact that Donald Trump only has a few years to go, it would probably, in my view, take longer to be really severe, but it certainly could be disruptive. And then it's a question of how radically the United States would get back to what we consider more rational, normal, friendly thoughts. That's not guaranteed, because there certainly are some in Trump's inner circle that could be candidates for president, and who knows. So there's no question, though, that the whole thing the whole chaos that comes about is disrupting to business. And this is where you see the threat in the stock market and in other areas as well. So it's devalued the United States. It's brought into question the United States dollar as the global currency, as the reserve currency, as the currency in which a lot of international trade is done.
Yeah.
How reliable will the United States be? And that's what's going to undercut things and lead to a return to what we would call the status quo ante, somewhat the way it was before.
But
Maybe.
the way this will unravel, John Jurisic, is kind of one product area at a time. I believe that the first senior member of the United States Senate to go to Trump and ask for an exemption on a tariff he was imposing on Canada was Charles Grassley, the senior senator from Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
He was very worried about a tariff on potash. The grain belt of America buys potash from Canada. And the Globe and Mail had a wonderful story on an Iowa farmer who buys $200,000 worth of potash at the beginning of the crop planting and $200,000 at the end. Now that's only one transaction. It's only one product. But more or less, that applies to a large number of products that this country and others ship into the United States. That's how this web of illusion will unravel. And it's already unraveling.
Yeah.
Okay. We've so far been focusing a lot on not this cup, but on products, tangible products that we can sell, we can touch, we can move around, and we produce. John, I teased you earlier about Waterloo and technology. It's, however, all of us know, the very heartland of technology innovation. BlackBerry was the catalyst, and research and innovation at U of Waterloo led the world, and we thank you for that. Now, to a large degree, the world has the major players in the world have switched from generally technology-based products like phones and digital products to some degree online products and therefore online services. And in many ways, so much of our data is being held in U.S. servers with Amazon and down in San Francisco and in Seattle with Microsoft. Can you give us an overview, please, from the world you're in as a global innovator in technology innovation? How are all of these tariffs and all of this war going to affect technology exporting, digital information exporting? Victoria has a budding technology industry, and we like to think of ourselves as significant. So would love to hear your viewpoints on that.
Well, to be brief, and I am not an expert, but let's just inventory, as you did, what some of the services areas are related particularly to data. But so you've got digital media, you're in the business,
Yeah.
Software, engineering services, tourism, we've already mentioned. And of course, we're moving into this era of big servers. We've already been in the era of servers, but with artificial intelligence, of course, we want to keep in mind keep in mind quantum computing, AI and quantum computing are Canadian strengths. We want to make them even stronger.
Are they
So,
Canadian strengths?
I certainly would attest to it. I'm not
Okay.
an expert in either, but I've worked very closely with the quantum computing area, which is
Yes,
extremely strong.
that's
And
great.
yes, technologically, we're leading or at the leading edge of. So we have good things to bring to the table. But then you get these big AI or the data servers that get bigger and bigger and are more and more critical to doing things quickly. And they chew up tons of electricity. What is Canada also good in? And what is really a service? I mean, it may be electrons, electricity.
Yeah.
And of course, we're exporters of electricity to the United States. Doug Ford wanted to hold a few U.S. states hostage to the fact that they were getting their electricity from Ontario.
Yes.
BC has been strong. So this is a whole area that while there have not been tariffs, there certainly are emerging needs to define your sovereignty in this area.
Yes.
And I don't pretend to be an expert in that area, but there's a lot being written by very intelligent people about how Canada needs to strengthen its digital services regime, policies, and so forth.
Yes. And will we, John? Will we continue to be global leaders in this area?
We need to be very strong players, and in various of them, my belief is yes, we can be.
Mm.
But all of these areas require big investment. Education system is another big part underpinning it all. Electricity, education. We're pretty good in both of those. We've got to make sure we stay strong. That isn't the case in every province, in every educational field. I think many would agree. So let's go for it, and let's really make sure that we're in the front ranks. So those are some of the things, but there are all kinds of things going on online, and you can work with partners. I think services more often than in other areas, although typically you hire an agent as a partner to sell your goods, distributor or what have you. Partners are often very important in the services field because when it comes to delivery, and a lot of it is about understanding who your clients are and having closer interaction with them, I think. Those are sine qua nons, but no, it's an area we underperform. Of course, we have a services deficit with the U.S. is one measure, as we know.
Yes, yes.
Which allows us to say that we're more or less in balance or even in surplus with the United States if you
That's
take
right.
both services and goods.
Yes, yes.
And it should be counted. It's important, and that's where the world's moving.
Just one comment on John Tennant's comments. I mean, one of the totally anomalous features of Trump's tariff war are the extraordinary tariffs he's placed on products like aluminum imports from Canada. Now, what is aluminum? It's electricity.
Electricity.
And every fabricator in the United States, including all the aircraft manufacturers, know that will be Canadian aluminum on the outside of the Boeing aircraft. It can't be anything else, except when they're using composites. And this is just, one tiny aspect of the willful blindness on the part of some and failure to understand that the world is round on the part of others that will compromise the U.S. economy massively, as I said earlier, one product at a time. When Trump put the tariffs on aluminum from Canada in his first term, there were 7,000 on steel, on tariff. There were 7,000 jobs gained in, I think, in the steel industry in the United States. There were 77,000 jobs lost among fabricators. It's just starting.
Okay, thank you.
I got to make one more comment on education. One of my postings was Hong Kong. And in 1981, when we arrived, there were 2,500 Hong Kong students studying in the United States and 25,000 studying in Canada. Think about that for a moment. The impact of the students studying in Canada on business in Canada is almost beyond calculation, leaving aside the delivery of education. It's a huge, I think the military term is force multiplier for the Canadian economy because the extent to which personal relationships develop when a family in Taiwan or a family in Bangkok or a family in London send their child to a school in Canada. That decision is not financial. It's partly financial. It's mostly trust. They're entrusting their child to an education system in a country that, anyway, enough said. It's massive.
Well,
And just to add,
yes.
education in the circumstances John is describing is a services export.
Of course
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
Money is coming from abroad. We're supplying the service, education in Canada.
Well, I remember the heydays of BlackBerry development and U of Waterloo and the we were global leaders by a country mile in technology innovation, and we are not anymore. And we need to get back there. We
Yes.
need to get back there, and I hope there is that kind of attitude with this government or whichever government um, rules us for the next 4 or 5 years. John, one of the signature elements of being online and delivering communication online is that people don't have a lot of patience to listen. So we're at about 35 minutes, and we likely, we should be thinking about ending, or we're going to lose our bazillion viewers. Give us, please, some summary thoughts. What might you wish to leave the viewer around where we're at and maybe where we're going?
Well, number one, let me just spend a moment to talk about what I think would be some priority markets that aspiring exporters could look at. First, around that Pacific basin with the free trade agreement, certainly Australia and New Zealand, I think, would be marvelous places to start or to expand. English speaking, accessible, similar economic and historical, political roots, part of the Commonwealth, English speaking, similar vibes. In Southeast Asia, which is also covered by the free trade agreement, places like Singapore and Malaysia, places where you've got to be very competitive. They're very, very sophisticated economies, surprisingly to many, English speaking, accessible, and so forth. One to watch out for and get on the bandwagon early is Indonesia. We've negotiated a free trade agreement with Indonesia. It requires parliamentary approval, which is going to be coming. It's expected in the session that soon begins. And of course, Indonesia is an incredibly large, incredibly dynamic market. And I've mentioned before, South Korea. We've got the free trade agreement. The Americans really don't any longer. It's a growing market. We're seeing the ties build, including in the area of defense that would be of consideration. So those are ones that I would put forward, as well as in Europe with the free trade agreement there. You've got ones that would be obvious, the United Kingdom, but there are lots of other European countries. And again, we got a leg up on the Americans.
John Treleaven. Oh, sorry.
I guess I should just add too, of course, Mexico, where we still have the full agreement, and we have free trade agreements with several other Latin American countries. But start in Mexico. That'll tell you how competitive you're likely to be in Latin America.
John Treleaven, yourself, any summary comments?
Well, all I would say is that in the end, it's customers that drive business. And the beauty of the free trade network that Canada has patiently developed over many years, starting with the Auto Pact, think about that, 1984. You weren't even born then, John.
Which John?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Victoria, John.
I'm teasing.
But what that has left Canada with is exactly what John Tennant has described. We have the pathways, we have the global reputation, we believe in fair trade, we're a major importer, we believe in as free as possible the movement of people, education, the education system John's already described, but we welcome tourists from around the world, we welcome immigrants from around the world. If we can't make a meal out of that, and we have, there's something very wrong. The challenge, of course, is that with the millions of jobs that are currently generated by American consumers, the number, by the way, is approximately 6,000 jobs in Canada per billion of exports. So I'll leave you to do the math. There's a lot of transition to happen. And the core of the success of that transition is the risk appetite of entrepreneurs who own businesses. The role of the governments involved, including British Columbia, is to be very wise about risk mitigation for those businesses. And that will be a complicated business. That'll be a complicated thing to do. But we have the assets. John's already described many of them. In all of those markets,
Yes,
every
we
one
do.
of those offices is your office,
Well,
and we can do it.
so
And maybe just one final thing,
of course,
Chair
John.
John, which is to hark back to when I first got involved with the Trade Commissioner Service. As I came in, a very notable Canadian Trade Minister was departing the trade portfolio. His name was George Hees, gorgeous George Hees. And he promoted trade and thought it was the greatest and most enjoyable job he ever had. But what he challenged exporters with was tie pins and other things that had 5 letters on them. BSOYA. You can't do business sitting on your
But we have a couple of comments from a gentleman who is a well-known digital marketer in the region, Sean O'Hara. Hi, Sean. Reinforcing our discussion around the need for innovation, and also loved the discussion with what he branded us as the 3 Johns. So, John Tennant, thank you. It looks like we've established a brand, and I very much hope that we can have a regular conversation with you as this trade environment, this global trade environment evolves. Mark Breyer as well. Thank you for the great information and discussion. Wonderful. We've had some listeners.
Terrific.
So, John, until we meet again, my friends.
Yes, John and John Tennant, thank you so very much for joining us today. It was great.
Well, it was a very happy time spending some time on the West Coast. It's a great place to be. So consider yourselves privileged, but keep up the great work.
Okay. Take care, everyone. We're ending our stream. Thank you.